I'm not going to stand in front of a mic because I have a big mouth and you'll hear me. My story starts out in 1998. I was living in Pasco County, Florida, which is just outside of Tampa. I heard of a tryout for a semi-pro soccer team in Greenville, South Carolina called the Shamrocks. Now, mind you, I've never been to Greenville, South Carolina. I was born in New York, raised in Florida, which is New York Part 2, and never even thought of coming to South Carolina. So I drove 8.5, 9 hours on a whim just to see how good I was at soccer and see if I could make a semi-pro team. Pull into Greenville, and it's just like perfect little town, nothing like New York or Tampa. And I pull in the parking lot at Serene Stadium. Now understand, I'm not from here, so I don't know the history of Serene Stadium. Nothing about it. I'm just a young kid who thinks he's good enough to play pro soccer. And I see this great stadium, and I'm like, wow, this is where the pros play. This place is awesome. So I walk inside, in the gates. You get a number because you don't have a name when you try out for pro teams. So I get my number and I walk down to the grass, and it hit me like, this place is amazing. It's heaven on earth. Like, the stadium's old, it's very historic, it's downtown. And again, I'm not from here, so in my mind, I'm like, man, the pros play here, this place is awesome. So we go through the first tryout. I'm not thinking I'm gonna make this team, but I just wanted to give it a chance. We get through the first day. I made first day's cuts. And I remember walking out the stadium going, man, this place is really, really cool. Go home, come back the next day, go through tryouts again, and of course I'm still admiring the stadium because I'm like one of those history buff guys and I just love historic things. Well, I made it to the second day, and now I'm thinking, holy crap, I might make this team. We get to the final day. I made it to the final day. There were 500 people trying out for 5 spots, and I made it down to the last 22, and I stopped thinking about the stadium then, and now I'm like, oh, I gotta try to make this team. We get to the end, they announced who made the team. Obviously I didn't make the team. And I remember just sitting there in the middle of the field after they made their thing, and in my head I'm going, man, I just made it to the final day of cuts for a semi-pro soccer team in the coolest stadium I've ever been in. So as I was leaving, I was like, kept telling in my head, I'm like, man, this place is heaven on earth. I would love to be able to coach in a stadium like this. So I leave and life goes on. My journey went, I started coaching college soccer at Newberry College. I coached at Newberry College for 3 years. I left Newberry College, went to Lenore Ryan College. I coached there for 3 years. But I remember in the back of my mind, I was like, even in a college stadium or a college campus, it still wasn't Serene Stadium. So I went, I was a juvenile detention center. I worked at a juvenile detention center in Florida. And I moved. I remember moving to Greenville thinking, I got to get out of Florida. I want to move to Greenville and start my life over in Greenville. But when you do that, you have to start everything over. So in Florida, I was a well-renowned coach. I played every sport. My dad made me play every sport. And he told us when we got to high school, you got to pick a sport and be dedicated to that sport. So your freshman and sophomore year, I was a quarterback. Played first and third in baseball. I wrestled, I boxed. I was a power forward in basketball, but my heart was still in soccer. Coached soccer in Florida, been to several state championships, never in a stadium like Serene. So when I moved to South Carolina, I had to start over. Nobody knew me here. I had to kind of build, my resume up. And first job that ever hired me was a charter school, Greenville Tech Charter High School. Before I got there, they only had a soccer program for like 4 years, and they were like 0-40 something. And I remember going through the interview process, and I remember the athletic director telling me, look, I want to give you the job. You have a great resume. You coach college soccer. He goes, but I want you to watch this team play before you accept the job. And for the life of me, I'm like, what athletic director tells you that, So, of course, me and my dad went to the game, and they lost 9-0. And my dad in Greek was telling me, son, you better not take this job. This is coaching suicide. And I was like, you know what, Dad? It's 9-0, but they're playing like it's 1-0. They never quit. So I took the job. First year in, we made the playoffs, got out of the first round of the playoffs. I started building my resume. Got hired on to a local club. More resume building. Left that school, went to another school, and now I'm into this thing where I like building programs. So I went to another school that hadn't won a game in years, got them to the playoffs, worked on, again, building my resume, networking, doing everything you got to do to show people that you can handle a big-time job. Well, at this time, I had coached for 2 clubs, networked myself. I'm like a sponge, so when coaches and stuff talk to me, I take it all in. I am not one of those people that thinks they know everything. I literally listen to everybody. A couple of jobs opened up, East Side boys, East Side girls, Wade Hampton, Riverside, and Greenville girls job. And I remember thinking to myself, that's that school that plays at Serene Stadium. So, in my head, I'm going, wow, I could literally coach in Serene Stadium. And I hadn't gotten the job yet. I got offered a job at each of the other schools, but when I interviewed, and Greenville was my last interview, so I interviewed at East Side, interviewed at Wade Hampton, interviewed at Riverside, and then I interviewed at Greenville. I went into the interview, and all in my head I was going, oh man, I get to coach in that stadium if I get this job. But I didn't want to show them how excited I was for the interview. Went in, talked to the athletic director, talked to the assistant principal, and they were like, we want to offer you the job, but we're not offering you the girls' job. And I'm thinking, all right. So we're going to offer you the boys' job, and we want to give you the weekend to figure out if you want to take it. Now in the back of my head, I'm like, are you crazy? I get to coach at Serene Stadium, I'll take this job. So I went home, prayed about it, didn't think nothing of it. Now mind you, I played for a semi-pro team, I coached college soccer, I've done all this stuff in soccer. First game of the regular season at Serene Stadium in the locker room. And I'm playing a good friend of mine, Dave Hennigan, who's the head coach at TR. He was my first game in Serene Stadium. I remember sitting in the locker room, I was getting like nervous. And if any of you know me, first of all, I'm a cop, so I don't really get nervous. But I was nervous, I remember I was getting goosebumps. I was like, my butterflies, I was like, oh man. And it didn't hit me to how historic and how great Serene Stadium was until I walked out of that locker room and I was the head coach of the Greenville High men's soccer program. So the first 10 minutes of the game, I wasn't even coaching. Like, I'm looking around, just looking at the stadium, and yes, a lot of people are like, that place is a dump. You know, it's all concrete. You guys don't understand, from a historic buff, playing in something like that is literally heaven on earth. Well, 10 minutes went by, and then I realized, oh, I'm the coach of the team, I gotta start focusing. We went on winning my first game ever in Serene Stadium, and I remember walking off the field, having that same feeling I had walking off the field when I got cut for the Shamrocks. Like, it went full circle. I now have the opportunity to coach in a stadium that is heaven on earth to me, and now I'm the head coach of Greenville High. And that's my greatest moment, was being hired at Greenville High.